What's up, everyone? Welcome to GameSpot. We're here playing Civilization Beyond Earth Rising Tide, the new expansion that will be out in a little more than a month, October 9th. And I'm here with co-lead designers David McDonough and Will Miller.
How you doing?
How's it going?
Good. I'm pretty excited to see this. I've heard a lot about it, but you guys are going to show us more of the intricacies between the new systems and how it changes,
Yeah, this expansion is huge. I mean, it really covers the entire game and changes the way that Beyond Earth plays. So if you're used to the base game and this is your first time playing Rising Tide, you're going to be really surprised at how different the game is. So we're going to play maybe 50 or 60 turns here and talk about all of the new different systems. We've got brand new biomes, diplomacy, hybrid affinities, a new artifact system, expanded quests, water gameplay. So we're playing Duncan Hughes, who's one of our new leaders, and one of his things is he gets to land on the water. So right away, we're going to see one of the new features of the game here.
And that's a big thing, obviously, the titular thing about the expansion is that you could, 100% of the map, or almost 100% is playable now because you can build cities and move them around on the water. How is that going to affect overall strategy and whatnot?
Well, we wanted to make sure that water gameplay, that water tiles weren't just blue land. But we also didn't want to change the formula so much that you had to relearn everything when you play on water. So the basic idea is that the resources and the distribution of resources and how you gather yields are a little bit different. But the main difference is that your city does not move. So your city doesn't grow in the way that it does on land. It moves, and that's how you get territory. So you're going to literally drive your city around to gain territory. So with that small tweak, it changes the entire sort of strategic implications of building on the ocean.
So are there benefits to having a kind of hybrid, land and sea civilization, or have you found it's better to try to focus on one, or is it just like everything else civilization where it can be whatever you want it to be if you're playing it right?
You can definitely have power in both cases. So one of the big goals for us with aquatic gameplay was that we wanted it to be seamless with land gameplay. We've said this a bunch of times, that the barrier to entry to playing on the sea should be no harder than playing on land. And that's because the seas are every bit as powerful. They're every bit as dynamic and alive and full of challenges and opportunities as the land. We wanted players to be able to embrace it at whatever pace was comfortable for them. So once you could build a colonist, or in the case of Duncan Hughes, or if you actually planetfall at sea, as soon as you have the ability to settle, you can just drive right off the shore. Your units become amphibious, and you can play at sea. So that makes it really easy to just kind of look at the sea as another place to build your civ, to find power. So nothing is especially more difficult, easier or harder to do at sea. There are some balance changes. There are things that are faster at sea and some things that are slower. For instance, exploration is much faster because ships are much faster than land units, and there's no miasma to slow you down. But the aquatic aliens are also significantly faster too, and they can be a lot more of them, and they can be much tougher than the ones you see on land. So it's a little bit of a finesse game. You have to learn a little bit what is important, what is difficult, and what is easy when you're playing at sea. But in terms of hybridizing, whether you play an entirely land civ, an entirely water civ, or both, you can be equally powerful, equally competitive to win the game.
And so right now we're, kind of scouting out the land itself and the sea. Will there be, you said there are different monsters, obviously, than what we've been used to with Civilization Beyond Earth proper. Are there going to be a lot of different kind of resources you can run into and sea, or are they the same ones, but they're just in, you can get to them faster or have to move cities toward them?
So the sea has a unique collection of resources, as well as aquatic versions of the strategic resources, like Firaxite and Floatstone and Xenomass. Those have to be everywhere. But those are chelonia, and there's vents and other strange things that live in the ocean bottoms that you can mine or fish for that are only found at sea. And then likewise, the things that you used to find on land, you can still find there. So they're improved in much the same way, so they serve a similar function. But they're the way that they appear on the landscape because of the way the seas are generated is a little bit different. So when you settle your cities at sea, you do have to think about where you're going to get your resources and how you're going to drive the city around in a little bit of a different way. Driving cities is a huge deal for aquatic city or colony establishment, because you have to do it in order to get new territory, or either that or buy the plot. So if you don't have the energy, it's the only way the city's ever going to get bigger. And it costs production, which means you have to stop doing other things in order to do it. And when the game begins, you can only travel around on the shallows. The city is still a little fragile. You have to get some more advanced technology before you can sail into the deep. So, moving the cities, establishing a territorial foothold at sea, and like getting the city all of the plots and the resources it's going to need to be really powerful, is a much more active process. You must much more pay attention to the lay of the land, especially where the aliens are and where your competitors are developing, when you're deciding where to put your cities. It's much easier to expand on land, where you can just plunk down the outpost, and when it grows into a city, it'll just absorb the land around it, no problem.
And conversely, do you find that there's less pressure on where you're establishing a sea city, knowing that you'll be able to later move it, whereas the land ones, you kind of say, okay, this has this resources, it's a coastal city, I think it could be easy to defend if it came to a militaristic situation. Have you found that it's kind of a little more, less pressure on you to establish sea cities?
I think so. I mean, one of the interesting questions we faced when balancing aquatic gameplay was sort of a concern at the outset that actually it would be too easy to play at sea, because like there's no terrain obstacles, there's no miasma, there's nothing to stop cities from moving around. Wouldn't that be a better across the board than playing on land? And what we found, and what we ultimately were able to develop, was a really lovely balance where it's not necessarily easier or harder, it's just different. Depending on the way the ocean is laid out, or the way the land is laid out, or where your competitors are settling, or where the aliens live, there could be really lucrative spots on either one. Land provides that terrain obstacles, but terrain is also an obstacle for your enemies. It can be very difficult to attack land cities, whereas navies are really, really fast. There's nothing to stop them from just whipping across an ocean and surprising an unsuspecting sea city. So aquatic cities can be really powerful, but they can also be really delicate, and they really have to be looked after a lot more than a land city does. So depending on your play style, on the particular strengths of the civ that you're playing, on the particular stage of the game, you can find things that really power you up on playing on land or playing on sea, but also things you really got to watch out for.
And we're with the North Sea Alliance, obviously, more seafaring nation. Would it be a good idea to actually try to focus on land if you were going to be the civilization? Are they pretty dynamic enough to actually do that?
Yeah, it was when we have a civ that's focused on the aquatic gameplay, like the North Sea Alliance, we had to be careful to make sure that their advantages will not be eclipsed or useless if the map is primarily land. And of course, when you choose them, you should definitely make sure that the planet that you land on is one that has oceans. Otherwise, they really will have very little to offer in the way of sort of inherent power. But their character trait ability is that their aquatic cities move faster and are inherently stronger, which is sort of universally good. It doesn't matter where the cities are, what stage of the game it is, or what's going on, you're going to benefit from that. So they can apply their advantage no matter where their aquatic cities are developed and how many of them they have versus how many land cities they have. So North Sea Alliance can just as easily play on land as any other civ, but if they play at sea and if the opponents play at sea, they will have a sort of decided advantage.
And so while we're in the tech tree, have you made any changes to that? From what I understand, there's a little more UI things that you're doing differently this time around in terms of showing certain tech paths and whatnot?
Yeah, actually, this came one of the very first and most popular mods to the original Beyond Earth was a mod that colored all of the things that you get from your technologies and made it easier to read, what affinities you were going to get and what kinds of things you were going to find. So we kind of took inspiration from that and integrated some of that feedback. It's one of the most direct ways our players talk to us is to mod the game. One of the problems with the tech web is that there's just so much information here. There's a lot you can see, and we internally debated for a long time, would we hide some of it and show it gradually to the player, or do we hold back information, or what? And for Civ players want to see the whole path, right? Because they would go on Wikipedia and figure this out right away anyway, so it would just frustrate our core players to hide the information. So I said, okay, we have to show the whole web. How can we make it more readable? Well, we can put more color in it. We can change the shapes of the things that you get. We took a lot of feedback there, and I think came up with a pretty good compromise. It's still a lot to take in, but I think that's a thing that our players really like, is to learn the new lay of the land, so to speak. So I've been playing here a little bit. David's taken over the controls. We've been exploring the map, and we just got a satellite there. I found several artifacts. This planet is pretty artifact rich, so we just found a Messiah Stradivarius there from Old Earth. It's in great condition, so that'll give us a lot of culture. The artifact system is really exciting. It sort of is a growth out of our quest system, and is a way for us to reward the player with these neat objects that they can have and cash in for bigger rewards. So you always have this this risk-reward sort of long-term, short-term decision-making with artifacts. Do I cash in a single artifact for a bonus right now, or do I wait and get a set of 2 or 3 for a much larger bonus later? And of course, each one has quite a bit of fiction, and the images are beautiful, and it's a great way for us to infuse the game with more sci-fi and world-building stuff that our players really like.
I think that was always interesting to me, is how, you know, like, the civilizations themselves have different reasons. I know, like, some of the new ones came in a second wave, or later on waves of people exploring planets.
All of them did, actually. They're more, what we say is they're rougher around the edges. So after the Great Mistake, there was the original wave, the first wave of the 8 that you know of, and that was the base game. And then these guys came along, you know, maybe 50 years later. They stayed behind and had to deal with Earth, whereas everyone else kind of took off, right? So they don't really have a chip on their shoulder, I'd say, but they certainly had to deal with more, or they had to do more with less. So, for example, Al-Falah, who's a leader we'll see in short order probably, their whole civilization grew out of the Middle East, the ruins of the Middle East, and they came back, they came to the New World in a generation ship as opposed to being asleep the whole time. So their whole culture is built in a fundamentally different way, and that is reflected in their gameplay. David was very adamant. We have a Scottish a leader in Duncan Hughes. He could probably speak to their origins as well.
Yeah, when we were establishing the aquatic gameplay as a foundational idea for Rising Tide, we definitely wanted factions that would emphasize it. So we have 4 new factions. 2 of them emphasize the sea. The North Sea Alliance is one, and then the other one is yet to be revealed. So North Sea Alliance we grew out of just a lot of enthusiasm around the design group for, I guess, naval history, maritime naval history, and also the fact that in the base game, the Nordic countries and Great Britain were not represented. They were not specifically called out. So that was a match made in heaven. You know, Great Britain and its history on the seas, and then sort of the Scandinavian, likewise, with going even further back to their Viking heritage. Like, this could be an awesome combination. And so North Sea Alliance was established as a faction. And then personally, because my family is Scottish by heritage, and I'm a big fan of the idiosyncrasies of Scottish culture, I wanted the leader to be a Scot, and so he is. So they're a lot of fun to play, and a lot of fun to play against, because Duncan Hughes is such a character.
So how would you characterize him, describe him?
We can take a look at him here.
Yeah, he's very he's very scrappy, like scrappy and like sort of like rough. He's described as being kind of like a workman, sort of union level, labor level guy turned politician. You know, there's a strong tradition of this in I think in British history, of like Scots being kind of underdogish in their political lives, though certainly not always. And so he's got this very air of being very rough, like bare knuckled, and sort of does everything with his own hands kind of air about him.
He also wears a Sega Genesis for a belt.
He's got a great costume.
It's pretty awesome.
He's the largest, like physically the largest leader, and his personality is very kind of like in your face, kind of blunt, no nonsense. Doesn't really get spooked very easily. He's not easily scared. He's sort of seen it all, kind of thing. And he's very devoted to his particular agenda, which is like establishing this aquatic empire and safeguarding his population. But he can be a really, really loyal friend. Like this, and these are some things that we're able to reflect in the new diplomacy system. There's these personality quirks of like how suspicious a person is, or how likely they are to maintain respect for you once they've reached it. How easily scared they are. So he's a fun guy to have as a friend, or have as an ally, and he can be a very tough enemy because he's very tenacious, very stubborn.
I could see him riding a bear or something.
Yeah, you could like, we designed him, like you can see in the new leaders a little bit, him especially, they are a little larger than life, a little bit more than the original 8 were. The original 8 were cut from a very kind of plausible cloth, and only like only a few of them started to reach a little bit further on like how they became less people and more icons of their particular culture. But the 4 new leaders are much more iconic, I would say.
It's interesting to see how people like Duncan or with like, Alpha Law, they're what you think of their culture back like in the world we know it, but also balancing that with what it might be on other worlds in like a sci-fi setting and whatnot. Because it's interesting because I know like Alpha Law, I remember they're saying like a lot of those people are actually that are landing on these new worlds have never been on a planet before. They're all born in space, not all of them, but a lot of them. Is it kind of are you going with like a more narrative angle with the expansion, more so than you did with Beyond Earth?
Well, we definitely don't want the game's narrative to supersede the players.
Sure.
I think that Civilization, one of the strongest, if not the strongest thing about this kind of game is its ability to let players tell their own stories. And we certainly didn't want to trample on that, which is why we held back quite a bit of the fiction development, the world building that we did in the base game. That turned out not to be a great idea. I think in a sci-fi game, there's this expectation of sci-fi stuff, world building that you provide that is basically given to us for free when we make a historic Civ game. So we decided to sort of double down on putting that in the game and designing new mechanics that highlight it, like the artifact system. Each artifact, you can see, has like a blurb sort of giving its history, and it's a great window into the world that we've constructed. And the diplomacy system is similar. It's a window into the characters of these that we've created here. This is Mass Bathhouse. There you go.
It sounds useful.
Sounds gross.
That sounds disgusting. So the narrative, there's definitely a lot more narrative, a lot more of the storytelling stuff in the expansion. But again, it was very important that the player's story is the most important.
Sure. I think my default strategy in most Civ games is to kind of go for the cultural angle, but every once in a while when I think military might be a good way to go, I always kind of just say, all right, I wouldn't normally go this way, but I'd really like this time if I could just, role play as that militaristic, just crazy leader that just takes over everything in his path. And that's always when the games become really interesting to me.
Well, that's what we're going to try to do, I think, in this game.
Awesome.
Yeah, no, not yet. Yeah, we're going to set up a scrap with somebody close by. Hey, look, France, why not?
Perfect.
So we'll go for a military angle and start a war with finding artifacts.
There seem to be, like you said, there are a lot of these artifacts scattered around.
Well, this is an unusually high rate. I mean,
Okay.
I think we're getting them a bit faster than we, statistically would, but it's still, depending on how much exploration you do and whether you hit a lot of resource pods and sites and things, you can find lots of them. So we've hoovered up a lot of resource pods, which means we've gotten a lot of old Earth artifacts, which are definitely useful. But there's a lot of power to be found in the other ones, the alien ones and then the progenitor ones, which we haven't really gotten much of yet. See, if I go back, I'm getting tons of old Earth artifacts, which is definitely useful.
It's good for us, yeah.
Stick that in the furnace and make some science out of it. So,
As one does.
So if we're going for a naval civ and we're going for a war, gotta have submarines. Love submarines. So one of the most fun parts about designing the aquatic expansion was bringing back and sort of re-fleshing out the naval military options. Like navies are they're a fun game to play if done right. And it's always been a little disappointing to me in historic civ how long it takes to get your navies really going because, well, frankly, we didn't sail that well until many thousands of years after civilization was established. But that's not the case in a futuristic game. You can get on the seas right away. And aquatic gameplay wasn't that big of a deal in base BE, so you had kind of a one-size-fits-all naval unit and then a carrier, and that was good enough. But with all of the stuff there is to do and all the competition happening on the seas, the navies had to compete. So there's more than, there's several classes of naval units. Carriers are a lot more elaborate. There's a lot more hovering units, which are amphibious, they just slide back and forth so that armies eventually become terrain agnostic. But we also brought back submarines and the concept of invisibility, which is a lot of fun in military conflict. So submarines in Civ 5 had invisibility of a type, and we sort of simplified and expanded the rules a little bit to be a little more universal because we also have invisibility on some land units. So a couple of the hybrid affinities have unique units that are also invisible, and that can be really fun. But submarines are now a huge deal. You really need them for an effective navy, especially for an effective siege of aquatic cities, because with the way that everything moves and the way that navies are much more of like an active defense as well as an active offense, to take an aquatic city is as much a function of taking out its protective navy as it is the city itself. And submarines are invaluable for that because of their ability to hide, to ambush, to pick off, and then vanish into the seas. You can whittle down somebody's navy without them being able to respond, because navies are a little bit more expensive, a little more difficult to maintain. Every ship lost is that much of a bigger blow. Plus, against the aliens who have no concept of submerged units and invisibility, submarines can be invaluable. So if we get a few subs out there and a couple gunboats to back them up, we'll start to clamp down on the expansion ambitions of Franco Iberia to our north, and then we can augment that with a land army to follow up and take out their capital, or try to. We will try to do that.
So if you're going for a militaristic angle, a land army is still pretty essential as far as...
Well, not necessarily. I'm saying that for Franco Iberia because they're built on land. So our navies can't capture their cities alone. But we said we were going to play to our strengths first. Duncan Hughes and NSA are a naval civ. So getting a naval superiority is going to be easier for them across the board. So I'm going to jump on that advantage while we can. And then we're going to leverage that into like an amphibious power once we're preventing Franco Iberia from retaliating. Park our ranged units off the coast, shoot at the land units as they mill around. And then when the path is clear, we'll land a few well-placed Marines and siege units and take out the city.
Cool. You mentioned the diplomacy options earlier. Is that something you want to get into later? Or
yeah, no, we can do
that
that now, actually. We've been slowly accumulating a new yield called diplomatic capital. We have 149, we're making 5 a turn. Diplomatic capital is the fundamental yield that drives the diplomacy system. Now that we've met a few leaders, well, we've met one leader.
The one we plan to fight.
The one we plan to fight. So diplomacy does a few things. The first thing that it does is it makes the characteristics of your leaders very important. And the characteristics take the form of these things called traits, which give the character some unique spin or ability or predilection. So we have, we have one character trait that's always there. Dave, pronounce this word.
Indefatigable?
There you go.
It's always eluded me as well.
Define it for me.
It means untiring or never exhausted, never fatigued. It's actually...
We're trying to raise the level of discourse in the...
We're Phyrexis. We're very highfalutin over there. It's actually a long and much beloved name of British warships. Like there's been many indefatigables throughout their history.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So
it's like the Enterprise or the... the Constitution for the United States.
Well, 2 other people that play this game will appreciate that.
Somebody somewhere, one person, is now really excited that I know that and care about that sort of thing.
He brings it up at dinner parties and whatnot.
Right.
Did you know?
Indefatigable.
A long line of British ships.
So anyway, throughout the game, as you accumulate this currency, you can spend it to upgrade your character's personality, and you can buy with it up to 3 additional traits: political, military, and domestic traits. And these we actually need 1 more point to buy this at any time.
Maybe advance the turn while you're talking.
Right. Yeah, let's do that actually.
So is there an effort to make it very clear what you're going for in diplomacy and where you're headed because of what you have this like currency almost that's kind of increasing certain traits with other characters and leading you toward a certain hopeful solution?
Well, diplomacy does a lot of different things. You can expand your personality. The AI players are expanding their personality. You can make agreements with other AI. Or other players, I should say. You can change the relationship you have with other players. So let's go through this. I can make agreements with LOD. She's got 2 here: think tanks and philanthropy, each which give me different bonuses. And these are big, sort of civilization-wide bonuses. I can afford one. I can't afford the other. Or I can change our relationship. So you'll kind of recognize this from Civ 5 and Beyond Earth, but it's sort of different. Like the relationships, being in a relationship means more in this game. So as my relationship with a Civ gets better, the agreements that we have together get better, the things that I can do, our trade routes get more effective, lots of different things happen. So we can spend our diplomatic capital to change the relationship, and provided the leader either is very afraid of me or respects me a lot, they will agree to that. So we don't need to change our relationship because, again, we're going to go to war with her in a bit. But you're right. Basically, the diplomacy system kind of brings a degree of transparency to what the AI does. Like so many times in Civ, I've played and the AI has backstabbed me or gone to war all of a sudden for no particular reason. And there actually is a particular reason. Under the hood, there's lots of math going on that decides that a Civ should go to war or not. And what we've done is we sort of brought a little bit of that math, a little bit of those numbers up front so the player can see them and strategize around them. And also through the traits, you can predict what things that a Civ will like, what things a Civ won't like, and cater to those things if you want them to like you more.
Seems sort of similar to how the tech tree, you kind of, like outlined things a little more transparently.
Yeah, information. I think that's a key for us. And it's always tricky because like the tech tree is a good example. We didn't want to bombard players, particularly new players, with too much information, but we need to have just enough. So David has just stumbled upon one of another new feature in the expansion called marvels, and these are these huge structures or natural formations on the planets that you'll find. So we found this giant crater
and another one
and another smaller one. So the idea here is that once you find the big one, it's revealed to all of the other players on the map, and a quest is started for everyone.
Yeah, this one.
And the quest is to find some number of the smaller ones. So there's a big one, and there are always smaller ones. And once you find all the smaller ones, you get this quest reward which can color the rest of your game. It's usually a pretty big benefit. In the case of the meteor there, if we find, I think, 3 more of them, we get a huge production boost. And if we find additional ones, we get more production. So the primordial biome maps can always be production focused because that particular marvel shows up in the primordial worlds. So that's one of the ways that we give these maps their own unique spin, is through the marvel system. Also, the AI is slightly different with the aliens. The alien stats, alien behaviors are different per planet as well.
Okay, and yeah, like you said, you mentioned you were going to attack Franco Iberia, so you might not want to waste the the diplomacy points on them.
Yeah, actually, we can spend them to upgrade our own traits at this point, or find an ally on the map at some point to spend the capital to make agreements with them.
Which one do you think we should do?
I don't know.
I'm close to getting a few other people on the map, but it's still really early. They may not have a lot to offer.
Right.
I think we might be better off with a trait, because we don't have. Plus, will set us up to sell some.
Right.
So you have 4 categories of traits. You can have 4 active at one time. Character trait is always unique to your leader. You always have that. You can't change it. You can just make it better. So the other 3 are depending on what you're focused on, you can pick a trait that augments a particular portion of your civilization. So the domestic ones focus on your individual yield output, and like what your active citizens do. The political ones tend to focus on your relationships with other civs, and a lot of their effects have to do with how many agreements you're maintaining or what happens when you maintain them. And then military obviously is about how you want your tactical operations or strategic operations to function. So your military to be better, to be faster, to be cheaper, more numerous, more experienced, more about defense, more about offense, and so on.
So Dave, I want to fight. Let's pick a military trait.
All right, let's pick the efficient one so that we can build them easily.
So this will give us plus 50, at the first level, it'll give us plus 15 production for military units. We'll be able to build military units much faster. Now, when you select a trait, you also get agreements which other civs can buy from you. So your trait is not just benefits for you, but also benefits for others as well, if they decide to make these agreements. So the agreement that this one provides is private arms development, production costs for military units reduced.
So by selecting a trait, you're simultaneously taking on a style for your own civ. Like you're specifically sculpting your playstyle to say, I want my civ to be good at these things, to be maybe the best at them, but also to be about them as far as the other leaders are concerned. So they can look at you and say, oh, this guy is emphasizing military, this guy's emphasizing commerce, emphasizing research, whatever it is.
All right, Dave, we got your submarines.
All right.
What do you think is next?
Everything. We need more science.
We do need some
Why don't
science.
you go genetics and we'll pick up some science. The other leaders can look at those traits and get agreements that match them. So likewise, if somebody else in the world had picked efficient, I can say, oh, they're emphasizing large military because they're picking a trait that makes it easier for them to build. If I ever want to build a big army, I would do well to be friends with that guy and harness the agreement that they offer to get a little bit of that power. So the diplomatic character you take on not only augments your individual civ, but it also makes you a particular style, a particular kind of friend to have in the actual world. So that if you're playing a game and you're watching the diplomatic landscape, You can make friends with the people who are good at the things you're not good at. They can plug the holes in your civ that you need plugged without you having to develop the infrastructure or spend the time to do it yourself. So that was a big deal for the new diplomacy system, was making it relevant to the whole game and making it so that you can use it to express your civ's identity and you can solve real problems that you really have. So not just, for instance, trading individual units of energy or resources, but actually expressing values and identity on a grand scale and really making it about like the meeting of minds of nations and not, sort of the wheeling and dealing of on a micro level like you would do with a trade round. So the fact that we took on this trait means that we have this agreement available, which hopefully other people will buy from us, and we'll start to get diplomatic capital from that, which will power up our diplomacy, our capabilities, and we'll be able to make our trades better, take on new ones, make more agreements. Like, it's a self-reinforcing system. The more diplomacy you do, the more there is that you can't do.
And it's all very clear as to what goal you're working toward. If you need to supplement your military, then you know that, okay, this alliance would benefit me in this area, so I can focus on culture, or vice versa, because, like you said, there's that transparency with the diplomacy system now and the other leaders, and it's less unpredictable, but still very much, it seems like I'll be able to definitely have a firmer grasp on controlling those diplomacies if I do have control in the first place, just, because whereas the leaders there was the complex math under the surface, like kind of working them towards certain actions and reactions, but now you're like, okay, I see why they did that, or I see why that we're not allied anymore.
Right. So, and you can watch them do the same thing, like go through the same thought process. The leaders will pick traits that are reflections of their needs in a particular situation. So, Elodie she starts with her character trait, which is focused on culture, but that's her sort of spin. And then, depending on, if she gets in a war with us, which is going to happen, then the traits she could pick could end up being very military or production-based, because that's the world that she lives in now. She needs to deal with that, which could change the way her civilization grows up over time, which could change, in turn, the way other leaders view her. Like, she could become the other military civ, and another leader in the game that maybe would have been predisposed to do that will see, oh, I don't need to, rather just make a deal with Elodie or with us. And they can change in different ways. So it's got all these wonderful ripple effects where the leaders will respond to the changing circumstances on the ground, pick traits or change traits based on what's going on and how to best sort of surf the wave of power and opportunity. And then if you're, like I said, if you're watching that, if you're playing the diplomacy game, you can see those trends establishing, you can see the leaders picking like that, and you can manipulate them. So it can be really satisfying to pull off like elaborate schemes and sort of long-term strategic plays with particular leaders, pitting them against each other, or guiding one in a certain way to be sort of your sidekick and do the things you're not good at. Make them serve your ends.
Need to get this explorer back to my city. He's out of modules. Got this guy refilled.
Yeah.
So I'm trying. I have this agreement. Wait. Yeah. So
The pod.
Yeah, let me get the pod here. I want to get some. I want to get some more artifacts. Probably. Here we go. Okay. Let's see what we can get here. Science. That's not a lot though. That's more. I'm getting there.
That's even less. I would break down the two together. Yeah. Save the general for later.
Okay.
So, as you saw there, we're sort of like making sets in the artifact system is sort of exploratory. The rewards you get are a function of the categories of the artifacts, not the individual artifacts. So the fact that there were two Earth ones and one progenitor one was giving us an option from a certain subset of options. If we had alien artifacts or if we had more progenitor artifacts, those would have been different. And then every time you get a new artifact, or every time you're interested in a quick gain, looking at your artifacts for whether or not it's a good time to break down one for immediate power, or whether you should keep hoarding them in the hopes of a set. You constantly have that decision. We've already made two really good set buys and gotten two unique buildings. These are buildings that are only accessible via artifacts. So those are going to be big legs up. I think the one we got right away, the Frontier Stadium, lets our military units start with a free promotion, which is going to be even better once we get into this war, and we're building military that are starting out of the gate stronger.
So could you describe to me a situation that would prompt you to move your city if you were a naval city? Sorry, a seafaring city.
As a, like, strategically, or as...
Yeah.
Well, I've done it a few times here.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hugging the coast. Basically, the reason you move cities is to gain territory and new resources. So you kind of, when you plant a land city, your calculus is kind of like, I see the city growing in a circle. But you really have to plan the path your city is going to take more carefully when you build or when you're moving the city. And you also have to plan for it to not drive over things that are important. So if it drives over an improvement, it destroys it.
Okay.
So be very careful how you build your improvements.
So geometrically, will that kind of make the sea cities a little different shaped rather than just this growing amorphous blob,
Absolutely.
more like this snaking thing?
Yeah, I mean, you can paint whatever shape you want, and that can be used to your strategic advantage. We could potentially paint all the way over to her front door here, and be right next door if we wanted to. And she wouldn't be very happy about that, but we could do that. All right, what do you think I should do here, Dave?
Get the stadium so that you can get the free promotion.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and actually
Great idea.
moving water cities as sort of a form of tactical offense is one of the interesting side effects of moving water cities at all, because the city is extremely powerful compared to any military unit. But it's also really fragile, and it's a big risk if you drive it into a war zone without proper protection. So the fact that we're relatively close to her capital is on the surface a good thing, but we only have one city right now, and it's our capital, so we can't afford to lose that. So driving that right up to our front door and starting like a very, very close quarters war could work out really well for us. But if it goes south, it's going to be very hard for our capital to escape. And water cities start off inherently weaker on the defense than land cities. I mean, obviously, because they're just a lot more fragile. They can sink. They don't have the benefit of terrain to anchor to. So in a pitched battle, our capital probably cannot outcompete hers unless we were really emphasizing military. So what would be probably wise is if this was a little later in the game, we would have a second city. Now we would form that into like a fortress city.
Well, actually, I was just going to say we have enough money or enough energy to buy a colonist.
Did you research Pioneer?
No, I need to research Pioneer. You're right.
So we could set up that. That's a sort of a longer, slower strategy. You would think about that in a sort of like a grand war that was very protracted, because cities move very slowly, so you can't launch a surprise attack with the city. So right now it's still much better, given all of our advantages that are piling up for units, it's much better to make a really strong navy and go and just start pounding her from the sea, and then have a few Marines ready to do the final assault.
What do you think here?
What's under the what's available on Might? Is it just the new is it increased production?
Yeah, I mean we
That
already
can
have.
never hurt.
Yeah, we already have a trait that'll do that.
So
This
we can
will
just
double down. So our military unit production, once we start to build them, is going to be
Right.
through the roof.
I think we've got enough advantages now that as soon as the Frontier Stadium is done, we should start.
All right, we'll build a tall city and,
Right.
and just roll out. Now, do we want to unlock one more type of unit before we prosecute this war?
We've got the naval fighter and the naval melee.
Right, or do we want to get a bump in some affinity first?
Yeah, that would really benefit. If we're at equal XP on all three,
Yep.
so anything that's cheap, looks like nothing's that cheap.
I mean, alien life forms is a good pick.
Power systems.
Power systems is a good pick.
I think I'd go for power systems.
Yeah. All right.
So that'll be a little while before that's done.
Are you ready to go against Franco Iberia?
Yeah. So why don't you start building units, and we'll have them ready when we'll have like 3 or 4 ready when the
Sure.
XP.
You
tips
and me
over.
build a submarine.
Yeah, build a submarine.
So submarines, can they also attack cities, not just enemy ships?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're naval units, so they can only attack what they can get close to. So
Right.
if the city isn't on the coast, the submarine probably can't reach it. But they are ranged units, yes.
All right.
The invisibility rules are such that the sub is invisible as long as it hides, but as soon as you attack with it, it's spotted for the remainder of the turn. So subs are good for like surprise attacks in groups, like sort of a wolf pack style mentality where you surprise 3 or 4 of them at once, do enough damage to take out the unit that would be doing a reprisal, and then the next turn they'll vanish again. So
I need to attack that.
on their own, on solo, you really only want to do it unless if you're sure that you have at least a numerical even playing field, because getting the first attack by being a invisible unit will tip it in your favor immediately, and then you can survive. But if the sub is outnumbered, it can be very easy to take out because it's not that fast compared to any surface ship. Oh, you're gonna shoot the hydrocoral and die.
He was in the fog of war.
So you were talking about different additions with this expansion. You have diplomacy. Obviously, there's seafaring. The map is greatly expanded. You're also talking about hybrid affinities. Do you want to go into that at all, or talk about that, or would there be a better time to do so?
No, that's fine. I don't think we're going to get to actually build a hybrid unit here in 100 turns or so. It's a mid to late game change.
Okay.
So basically, if you recall from the base game, the affinity system was this way that we show how humanity adapts to the new world, and that's mainly reflected in your military, but in other ways too. But it basically boiled down to something that resembled an RPG class system. You were allocating, or you're sort of gaining points in different class types, and we're unlocking new abilities in those classes. And it came with the same kinds of problems, which is you could, like if you build a Diablo 2 character incorrectly, you can really hose yourself later on. And so there were builds that you could get into, affinity builds that were not quite as advantageous. And that kind of fights this idea of the exploratory tech web and the kind of role-playing that we want you to do as a player of Beyond Earth. So we added the hybrid affinities to fix that problem. So you no longer have to worry about getting the wrong affinity because you want the tech in the tech web. You can play and sort of get whatever techs you want, and naturally those combinations of affinities will unlock these hybrid units, which are very powerful. The unique hybrid units are pretty cool in that they sort of augment your military. They're not really frontline troops, but they do some really weird things. Like David mentioned, we have a land unit that's invisible. That's a hybrid unit, hybrid unique. And your base unit classes also have their top tier upgrade in the upgrade tree for those units has 3 hybrid variations. So you can have an entirely hybrid army, and that's great, and it's very effective. One of our instructions to our art team, and indeed to ourselves when we were designing these guys, is that we didn't want the hybrids to be just averages of the 3 affinities that we already had in the game. They each have their own philosophical take, their own art style, their own personality, and they're very cool. I wish we had more time with you today so that we could play to the point where we could get one, but they're sort of mid to late game things that you would see here.
In terms of RPG mechanics and kind of finding a balance between being a hybrid and not being an average, that kind of reminds me of the Mass Effect when you're making a character. Not that it's that much similar of a game, but you could have like the biotic and this the Sentinel as opposed to just an average of these two. It still had their own abilities and
exactly.
whatnot.
That's exactly the kind of thing we're shooting for. Okay. I think the first right answer is just to kind of blend. Sure. And in some ways that's the case, but it's definitely, especially from the art perspective, they're totally different. They look totally different. When we get a unit upgrade here, once this tech finishes researching, once power systems is done, we can show a few of the hybrids in the upgrade screen. Did you finish which quest did you just finish?
I'm about to finish that Visions in the Storm.
Oh, okay.
Not Visions in the Storm, the Beating Heart Society.
Okay.
Because I feel like I can get XP out of that. Build 3 soldiers. Oh, happy to. You read my mind, Quest. I got my sub out here. One of the things we added to the HUD was this little eyeball overlay that shows you where the sub would be revealed as it moves, so that it's an extra little tool for the player to keep their subs, or keep any invisible unit in ambush position, to not accidentally move it to a place where it would be caught out in the open.
So the other player can't see that sub. He is cloaked. He's invisible until
I either move into some area that would reveal him, or fight with him.
Right. And so Elodie's about to expand. This may be a good opportunity, Dave.
Yeah,
you
I
could
think I'm
pick
gonna have
off
to jump on that. In fact, I think I'm gonna.
She's going for her second city.
What did I just?
Yep.
Yeah. Which is a second sub. It starts with a combat bonus, which is awesome.
Nice.
Is that from the Frontier Stadium?
Yeah.
So what is it about those spaces that would reveal you? Is it the monster just sitting right there?
Yeah, the fact that like the invisibility, you're always revealed if you're adjacent to a hostile unit.
Oh, just sort of drove right into your lap there.
Like right now.
So I've got 2 subs. So this guy is still invisible because it's not hostile. So it's funny. You're innocent until proven guilty with invisible units. You don't reveal them to anybody on purpose. They have to be actively trying to find them before they'll find them.
Okay.
So now we need to get our war going. So I've got a gunboat as well. So I'm actually in pretty good shape to start this fight. Got a gunboat and 2 subs. That's going to go a long way. So let's open up diplomacy and break the bad news.
I've been meaning to talk to you.
So she's actually pretty impressed with us. You can see her fear is relatively low, which suggests that her military might actually be a match for ours, but not at sea, I don't think. Which is really disappointing.
Jeez, man. So you'll notice that as we do certain things in the game, you'll see these little communiques, we call them, pop up in the top there. Those are like little text messages that the leaders are sending to you. Very much like how politics and diplomacy is conducted in the modern era, really.
Yeah.
It's another way that the diplomacy system kind of highlights the personalities of each of these characters, and they all have their own pretty deep library of things that they say to you, depending on what you're doing. So she is pissed off. Oh man.
Get that thing before it escapes. So it sees I'm spotted now because there's hostile units adjacent. So since it's already spotted, I may as well shoot with it and not expose my other sub, which doesn't know I have 2 subs. That colonist is toast.
Nice.
That's a good start.
So move my gunboat in position and try to start picking off anything that comes out of that city. Can't get too close or she'll shoot with the city.
Yeah.
But it should be able to hold down. Yeah, see, run away. Get back in there. And bark units are still really vulnerable for land armies. So then I'm invisible again. If I can actually park within sight range of the city and still remain invisible with a sub, which makes it really, really cool. Because if I like array a bunch of subs out here, you know, lurking in the depths, she can't see any of them unless she puts a naval unit at sea. And then they can all attack on the same turn. Like I said, that Wolfpack thing where they like pop out, all fire off. The city only has time to reprisal against one, and then they all vanish again, which is really satisfying. Whereas the gunboat is a big honking battleship. You would definitely see that. So I'm just going to kind of keep that just outside range and do a little patrolling.
You may be able to pillage too.
Yeah, if I
get
can,
an
I can
opportunity.
sneak in.
Yep.
Expedition. I'm going to get on this brain while I can.
And so all the while, like at this point, when you're at war with Franco Iberia, seems like it would be pretty advantageous to find another leader and see if their strengths can either augment your military or just having an alliance with them could kind of fill any gaps you might have while you're at war with Franco Iberia.
Absolutely. So one of the things that can suffer, I mean, you can do one of two things, right? You can get something to bolster the war that you're fighting, or you know, when you're fighting a war, you're by necessity kind of neglecting your domestic growth. So you can also get through the diplomacy system get boosts to that as well. So we just met Barre, and he's a growth civ and tends toward growth type traits. So if we were behind the curve in growth and health or anything like that, we can go to him for some help. Oh, look at that! There's a Makara already wrecking things in her territory. That's why she's building so many military units.
She's got anti-alien operations going. So this could work out really well for us if she's distracted by that. we could be in a position to sack Liqueur faster than I would have thought. I'm building soldiers over here for the amphibious push. I'm going to sort of stage them over here on the continents and get ready to embark them when her city is reduced or when it's focused too much on taking out my navy.
Deal that final blow.
Yeah, so I tried pillaging there. I couldn't escape in time, so I took a shot, but I'll get out next time. Those guys, why don't you just wait a minute? So we finished the Marvel quest, which means now we have a big bump in production for a finite period of time. And every new one of these craters we find, we can we can resurrect or extend that bump. But that is actually true for everybody. Now that the sort of secrets of the Marvel are known, the whole planet can use it. So anybody else can get the same production benefit for themselves.
Well, they have to complete the quest.
Right.
So it's kind of a race to see who can get to it first, but it's not mutually exclusive. So anyone can find all of the minor marvels and complete the quest. But we're the first people to do it, I think. Yeah, I haven't seen anybody else going for them yet. So we're going to get a big production boost here if we can find more of those things.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Affinity progress. So I'm at level 2 supremacy.
We've got several that can be upgraded now.
Which will make my things a lot stronger. Brand new promotion. My Marines standing around.
It's interesting that the hybrid affinities are also kind of, like you said, mid to late game, because I think historically, or at least, like earlier games, it was those first, like, 50, 100 turns are really, really interesting. So hybrid affinities, it's interesting that they're coming in later. It seems like another thing that could completely change.
Yeah, we can actually show a couple of them, Dave. Why don't you click on...
Yeah, I've got this.
Before you...
How much joy
So I built all my, I actually have double progress because I built all the soldiers. So yeah, looking at the gunboat here, the hybrids are really, really quite beautiful. The bar is, superimposing because we don't have the affinity yet, but you can kind of see behind it. They've got their own style. Like if that's Harmony, this is the Harmony Supremacy crossover, and this is the Harmony Purity crossover.
Yeah.
Purity vote, and then Purity Supremacy, and so on.
Yeah, so we're always looking at ways to extend gameplay. Like, I think one of the classic Civ problems is that once you've explored the whole map, the interest drops and you want to re-roll a new map. So we've introduced a lot of new mechanics throughout, not just in Beyond Earth, but throughout the Civ 5 product line to extend the gameplay, to extend interest. New things come online as the game progresses that you're going to be interested in. We want to maintain that one more turn loop as long as we can. All right, Dave, what are we doing?
I'm getting ready to jump on the attack. So I want my gunboat to heal up, and I want my Marines ready. And then I'm going to shoot and cover their approach. I don't know if I've got enough yet. I think she's still not taking me seriously. She's got these colonists coming out.
She's definitely not on a war footing and is not afraid of you. I wonder if she has another city somewhere.
Maybe. I mean, I haven't explored that continent. I suppose there could be one hidden in here, but I feel like we would see the borders.
Yeah.
I think she's just, maybe her fear is higher now. Of course, we're at war, so all of that stuff is kind of disconnected. You don't really get to see another Civ's fear or respect when you're at war, because the idea is, well, you're not maintaining diplomatic relations. You're not exactly talking, so you don't get any sort of insight like that.
Okay.
Move away from that Makara.
Just park there and wait, wait for him to come out.
Pretty much.
She had a pretty bad start location too. She's on this little spit of land, but a land city, so she has to go out in the water.
Right.
And we will be there waiting for her.
Plays right into our hands, right?
Futuristic blockade or a siege.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can siege pretty effectively now.
Ah, here's Lena. So this is Lena, one of our other new faction leaders. She's the leader of Integer, which is a diplomacy themed faction of sort of German origin.
Okay.
And she's got a bunch of traits already, actually. She's a good ally to have in diplomacy because her her diplomatic options are stronger than most. She's very flexible and very powerful in who she can make agreements with and how she can make them. So,
Reginaldo too.
so we've met everybody, right? So when we're picking our allies, she can be a she can either be a really good one to have or really terrible, depending on like how she's positioning herself.
So you have enough of like the diplomacy points saved up. So if they had something you really wanted at this point, you could just go for it right now.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea.
We have we have about 170. Maybe we could get something to help us fight this war.
So check all the potential agreements.
Oh wow.
So these are based on what everyone's traits are. So the more traits they take on, the more agreements are in the marketplace, so to speak. So what would be good for us?
Let's see. I mean, we can get something that will boost our production, maybe. We can, I mean, look at Reginaldo's traits.
These are mostly defensive, like colonists and outposts improvements. The castle doctrine, of course.
We can also make our own traits better.
Yeah.
So that may be a better option at this point, anyway.
The only other thing I would consider would be shock and awe, but I don't. It's a little too expensive. The pillage and attack. I mean, because that way I could take out her territory and fight the city at the same time.
Right.
But well, it's not a protracted campaign yet, so I think I'd rather just make our traits better.
We can upgrade the one we have,
Or take a new one.
Take a new one.
Let's see what we got. These are all domestic focused, so I think we actually need more energy because we're going to maintain a standing army, which takes maintenance. So I'm going to.
It's really interesting how the diplomacy is almost just like it's a separate skill tree entirely outside of tech now, but it's also, you know, the product of cooperating or not cooperating with these other characters.
It's definitely a separate progression, and that's exactly what we wanted to build. Was we wanted to take personality and make it a progression. So the personalities of every civ changes over time, and what those personalities converge to over the course of the game is really important. Where we get our power from, who we ally with, is going to be very dependent on that personality.
So Lena, flexing her diplomatic muscle, she hired our agreement from us for private arms development. Okay. So now we're going to make a lot more capital every turn, which is really good. We're going to recover all that we just spent much more quickly, and we'll be able to buy some critical agreements and/or trait level ups when time is ripe.
So are there any other factions you haven't talked about that you wanted to today?
Well, there's one faction we haven't announced yet.
Okay.
And it's the remaining aquatic themed faction. Not themed really, but the remaining faction that can land by default on water.
Okay.
We're not announcing that today, but there's one more that we're going to talk about.
We mostly met everybody.
But
sometime in the next few weeks, hopefully?
Yeah, probably in the next few weeks you'll hear about it.
I got shot because she put those units to sea and they spotted me, so I gotta move out of the way.
Yeah.
I got pressed my luck a little too much by hovering that close to her. Yeah, see, you can see.
You gotta bounce out.
Guerrilla escape.
There you go.
But gunboat will take the shot. Put this guy out just outside of city strike range and then fight back.
Nice.
It's satisfying.
Yeah.
Those embarked units are really weak.
They're really perfect targets for submarines. They have no way of knowing that they're there until they're right on top of them, and then they're way too fragile and slow to escape. So, exactly what submarines were originally developed for, shooting down transport ships.
Well, I hate to cut this siege short because I'm rooting for you,
Well, that's okay.
but I think that's all the time we have today.
That's too bad. We got a few licks in. We're definitely about to go for the city, but
We'll assume you beat Franco Iberia and then everyone else.
just
It's a pretty good
cast
assumption at this
forward
point.
and write the next 100 turns of history of this game. So the Great War ended quickly. We consumed Franco Iberia, became a naval powerhouse, and eventually took over the world.
That was Rising Tide in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, anybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. We have David McDonough and Will Miller here, and Civilization Beyond Earth: The Rising Tide, the major expansion, comes out October 9th. And in the next few weeks, hopefully we'll hear about that last seafaring civilization. And thanks for joining us. Have a good day.